Live in Corporate is brought to you by Pfizer. Every day, Pfizer colleagues work across developed and emerging markets to advance wellness, prevention, treatments, and cures that challenge the most feared diseases of our time. For more than 170 years, Pfizer has worked to make a difference for all of those who rely on them. Learn more at Pfizer.com.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Clarity Podcast, where we'll not only get you the insight to help you transition your career, but we'll have raw, unfiltered conversations about equity and access in corporate America. I'm your host, Tristan Layfield of Career Clarity Solutions, formerly Layfield Resume Consulting. And today we have on Jake Small. Jake is a career educator and workplace equity consultant, and Jake offers profound contributions to the topics of career equity, workplace justice, occupational wellness, diversity strategy, and culturally responsive practices. His passion for art, healing, education, and advocacy comes through in his natural ability to educate through storytelling. And he focuses on the intersections of identity, justice, and professionalism to uncover truths about the world of work. So, everyone, welcome to the show, Jake. Hello, my friend.
Hey. It's so good to be here. Hello, Tristan. Thanks for welcoming onto the pod today. I'm excited to chat with you a little bit more.
Yes, I'm excited to have you here too. Thanks for giving us the time, my friend. I really appreciate it. I know you're a real busy guy. You got some things going on, so I appreciate you taking the time to sit with us today. I know we don't fully know each other, right? We met each other on LinkedIn. I actually saw you interacting with a couple of mutual connections of mine. And I was like, who is this guy? So I went to your page, and I was like, oh, wait, we're both in the same space. I need to connect with him. And then I noticed a little bit about your work, and I was like, let me reach out and see if he'd be interested in coming to the pod. So, I really appreciate you being open to taking the message from a stranger here and coming on to have this combo.
Definitely. Some of the best professional and personal relationships I have in my life right now have been built through social media in some way or another. I think that a lot of people are, thinking of LinkedIn as social media is new for some folks, but it operates in some of the same ways as Instagram and like Facebook used to, right? And all these other platforms. And so I'm grateful that I have enough of a presence on this platform to be able to, catch the attention of someone as awesome as you. When I first got your message, and I of course checked out your page and your headline, I saw LinkedIn top voice and career coach, resume writer, focusing on the same industry that I'm trying to focus on. I was like, oh, this has to be a connection that I nurture, and we see what comes of it.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not often that I run across a lot of Black males in this profession. Not to say we aren't here, but it's few and far between. There's quite a bit more Black women. Actually, you'll see from my guest lineup, like literally the first 8 to 10 guests were all Black women. So every time I'm able to encounter, someone, a Black male that's doing this work too, I was like, let's connect and sort of see what sort of synergies we might have around this. So I appreciate it. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And I'm just excited to jump in here. So
let's jump in. And I love that you've already started off with this identity consciousness, right? Because I'm sure that a lot of what I'll share today will be identity conscious. Recognizing some of my most salient identities, being a young professional, being Black, being a man, being openly queer, right? All of these identities overlap and intersect, and they make me who I am as an educator, as a professional. I'm sure your identities show up in all the things you do professionally. So I'm happy that that's at the beginning of our conversation today. Yes.
That's always at the forefront of my mind because it shapes everything. It shapes the way that we see everything, the way we interact with everything. No matter how much people might want to say it does, unfortunately. Right? So, with this, one of the things that I like to be mindful of, we got a lot of job seekers that are listening to the pod. And since we're in the career space and career development space and career readiness space, I always like to sort of start off talking to those people. So when you think about the people that you might be advising career-wise or working with in that space, what would you tell them the state of the job market is? The state of the job market right now is blank. What would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is going to be an interesting answer because I'm going to say on this media platform that job seekers should stop listening to media platforms, right? Because if you read an article, right, you look at
Yes.
Harvard Business Review, you look at Insider, you look at any of these platforms, and you look at what it's saying. Every day or every week, there's going to be something new, right? Either the job market is warming, it's cooling, it's really hot right now for tech, it's really cold right now for whatever it is. It's always going to be changing. And so I think that's what's most important is that the job
Mhm.
market is changing, and job seekers, whether you're in the beginning part of your career, you're a mid-level professional or a senior executive, because this job market is changing, job seekers need to be as dynamic as this changing market, right? I always tell the students who I work with in different capacities that the most important skills they can develop and grow is the ability to articulate the transferability of their skills in different and unique contexts, right? Like being able to talk about what you can do as a lifeguard or as a waiter or whatever other job you've had in the past to get you that, next opportunity is going to be really, really important. That
Yeah.
transferability piece is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I speak to my clients on that all the time, and I always tell them that you never want to assume an employer understands the transferability of your skill sets, right? You have to explicitly lay that out for them. How does it transfer? Which means you have to have an intimate understanding of how it transfers in order to be able to even convey that to an employer as well. So I appreciate that you brought that up, and that idea that the job market is changing right now and ever evolving. I love it. I love it. And you can tell them on this media platform to stop listening to the media all you would like, because I agree. I think it's important for people like us to keep up with the media and sort of, make our own interpretations based on the data and the things that we're seeing. But one of the things that really happened, especially once the pandemic hit, is talking about the job market in such a overarching way is no longer a privilege that we have, right? We can't just say the job market's hot, the job market's cool,
Yeah,
job
truly.
market's this, because if you look at it right now, by all numbers and standards, the job market is hot, technically. But then you are looking on the flip side and you see these companies doing all these layoffs and all these things going on. And then you have the Fed talking about the interest rate and talking about inflation and how higher unemployment rate would help inflation and like all these.
Yeah.
So all these factors come into where the job market stands. And so it's constantly shifting, constantly changing. And that can get confusing for people who are seeking jobs at this very moment. So I appreciate
Truly.
you calling that out.
There's so much dependability, right? So, it changes. I can't apply for every job, right? During the height of the pandemic, this entire nation, as well as the entire globe, they're looking for healthcare providers, right? Especially if you have some background or training in respiratory wellness, right? I was never going to be able to apply for those sorts of jobs, right? Like I have a degree in communication, a master's degree in education. The education field right now is very different than the medical field and the legal field and business. And so it's so dependent regionally. I have a lot of clients who are job seekers internationally and globally, right? So things look different in different places depending on the industry. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to put one adjective on what's going on with the job market right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, one of the things that I know that you have the privilege of doing in working in college career centers and things of that sort is working with Gen Z. A lot of Gen Z talent coming out of college right now. And when we talk about Gen Z, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the Gen Z, the Gen Z talent that's coming out right now, but just in general, I think people have some ideas around them, some good, some not so great. But what are like a couple of things you think recruiters need to understand about those Gen Z candidates that are searching for jobs, or how to attract and recruit them right now?
Yeah. So this is definitely, I think what I have to say to this question is maybe specifically for early career job seekers, maybe also some candidates at the mid-level role. And I would say that what I'm about to say is debated. But in a time of so much economic uncertainty, where the average Gen Z and even millennial worker can no longer see a clear pathway to true financial freedom, right? And the conveniences of life of home ownership, which used to be a much easier pathway in past generations. Candidates are looking for, to put it blatantly, overall high compensation, right? They want to be compensated. They want their overall compensation package to be high and valuable, right? Because there's so many things that need to be paid for, things that need to be financed, so many bills and loans that need to be paid off, right? So folks are looking for compensation, right? It's not just we want somewhere that's nice to work. We want somewhere that's fun to work. We want somewhere with lots of perks. Overall compensation needs to be high, needs to be at value with what folks are doing. For a lot of folks, flexibility is super important. That means different things for different people, right? It might mean working from home, working in the field, working in the office. It might mean flexibility in terms of like the types of work that you're doing. But people are looking for flexibility, whether it's time off, sick time to take care of their family, things like that. And also grace, I think that's part of it as well. Job seekers are burnt out. Job seekers are exhausted. Job seekers, just like everyone else in the world, have experienced this tragic event that we call the pandemic, and will have rippling impacts for years, decades, or even generations. Right? Folks are tired, and it's hard to apply for jobs right now. Right? It's challenging. There are so many steps. There are so many interviews. There's so much opportunity and space to be let down. Right? So folks have so much relying on their place of employment, like their healthcare, their housing, their food security, and that's a lot of weight, right? So folks are really tired. I think recruiters need to remember to be compassionate, need to remember to be empathetic in this process.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of those things. I think one of the things that I think would be very beneficial for both job seekers and employers is really looking at your entire sort of talent acquisition processes and identifying where you can cut out the BS, right? Things that aren't absolutely needed. Does your application need to be this long? Can we, do they actually have to do this assessment? Does it really tell you anything about their ability to do the job, right? Do they need to have an entire day of interviews, or could we potentially cut this back? What costs could you save on your end as a business doing that type of stuff, right? Figuring out like how we can make these processes a little bit easier on job seekers, I think would be useful on both sides, because I think one of the things that is pretty common with Gen Z from my perspective is that they don't like all the fluff and all the BS. It's like, look, let's cut to the straight, right? What is your company going to give me if I provide you this, right? That's sort of what they want to know at the end of the day. How does your company make sure that you are existing inside of the world in a fair and equitable manner? A lot of people are starting to be a lot more cognizant of that when they're making their employer selections. So I think a lot of the things that you mentioned are incredibly important for them to sort of attract and retain that talent. Now, on the flip side, with the people who are looking for jobs right now, do you have any particular advice for them and sort of what they should be doing or how they take care of themselves or anything?
Yeah, for sure. And, in the introduction, you named that I'm a career educator, workplace equity consultant. I think that folks can go out and find a lot of the standard tips that I could say by doing a simple Google search. And so I want to speak directly to job seekers and say something that they might not have heard before. And that's that before you think about where do I find jobs? How do I write a resume? How should my bullet points look? Remember that your worth is inherent, right? Remember that you're not defined by professional success. And while you have to rely on, professional stability to secure income and whatnot, you are not defined by your professional identity. Like we are all experts of our own experiences, and that's important to remember. And we are all deserving inherently of professional opportunities that fulfill us. With that in mind, I think that mindset's super important, and that when you're pursuing a job search, when you're pursuing an opportunity professionally, it's important to remember that it is not all of who you are. Outside of that, I would say a lot of the clients who I work with could benefit from diversifying their job search, right? Gone are the days where all of the opportunities will just be in one place, like a newspaper or on one website somewhere, right? If you're not on multiple platforms looking at multiple jobs at once, then you're going to miss out on lots of opportunities. And so I think that's a really important piece of advice. It's not necessarily easy to diversify your job search, which platforms you're using, but just applying is not enough anymore. Applying needs to be supplemented with networking, reaching out to folks who are hiring, asking around in your industry, becoming an expert of the things that you're saying you know a lot about, right? You need to be reading the blogs, you need to be watching the webinars, diversifying your job search in really intentional ways. I also think alongside that is good help, right? There are a lot of people like me, like you, Tristan, who have learned the ins and outs of this messy thing we call the world of work. We've learned the rules of professionalism, right? And they're not obvious to everyone. And if they're not obvious to you as a job seeker, it's important for you to find someone to support you, whether that's a career counselor, if you have the privilege of going to a college or university, accessing that as a resource, or people in your life, whether they be family, friends, or otherwise, who can walk you through some of these steps, right? It is not obvious to anyone the first time they're writing a cover letter what best practices is. And it's okay to need some support.
Yeah. Look, you are preaching all the right things for me. Right. I tell people always to operate in your zone of genius and outsource the rest. Right. So if that
wait. I like that one. Operate within your scope of genius. That's a good one.
Yeah. Operate in your zone of genius and outsource the rest, man. Because, we don't need to be a jack of all trades. We just simply do not. We need to focus in on the things that we're good at, the things we like to do, and become really good at those things. And then find people who are really good at the other things we need done and bring them into our circle, into our team, right? And whether that's a career coach or career counselor, whether that's a mentor, whether that's a sponsor, whatever it is, those are the type of people that you need to bring in to help you go to those other levels. You don't know everything. You shouldn't know everything. So, I think it's incredibly important to seek that help out when you realize, hey, I don't even know where to start. And I honestly wish somebody would have told me that when I was back in college. Because when I got out of college, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was like, okay, I got to find a job. Hey, where do y'all look for jobs? Like, I don't even know where you look. I just go into a store and be like, hey, you guys hiring? But that's not what we're doing today. So, I didn't know what was going on. So I wish somebody would have told me that as well. So yeah, that I appreciate that piece of advice. It's like, seek the help that you need, but also understand that, diversifying your job search can be a really, really great tool. Well, I guess a really great avenue for you to get to where you're trying to go. That, like you said, just applying online is not going to work. Getting a foot in the door, it means, networking, finding somebody. We know that referrals make you 15 times more likely to land an interview than just applying online, right? So that number in and of itself tells you that you really should probably try to get some ends here wherever you can. So
certainly. And it's a gift to be able to refer someone, right? I think a lot of folks get worried that if they reach out to their network and ask for something, they'll be seen as less than, they'll be seen as needy, as annoying, right? But when someone reaches out to me and they're like, hey, I know you're connected with this person, could you advocate for me? Could you set up an introduction? It's an amazing gift that I can give them of my time, of my energy, of my network, to be able to say, yes, let's get you in the door. Like, right, let's do an informational interview. Let's get you connected with the right people so you can make the moves that you want to make. And it's not all transactional, but remember me, right? There's this huge network that we're building where I do something in support of someone's professional career, not hoping or waiting for them to do something for me, but knowing that when the time comes and I need some support, I've built up this trusting and authentic network that can and will support me when needed.
Yeah, remember that law of reciprocity, right? You scratch my back, I scratch yours, 100%.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's the other thing is we got to get out this mindset that we can't help people come up, the crabs in the barrel mentality. Like, nah, we don't need any of that, anybody. And I'm not trying to speak specifically to Black folks because that's not the case. It's everybody. You can help out. Also, let's keep in mind that many companies and organizations, if you're getting a referral from an employee inside of there, they compensate the person who's referring you as well for that situation, right? Like, this could be very beneficial for both parties involved. So, the other piece I'd say about that too is remember that when you're reaching out to people, everyone doesn't want to help and everyone's not obligated to help, and that's okay. But you need to be persistent to find those people that we call boosters, those people that can help you, are willing to help you, that are naturally altruistic and want to do it. Don't let those couple of no's or those couple of unresponded emails, sort of guide you away from reaching out to other people. So find those additional contacts wherever you can and keep the process going if that's the case. So look, we can talk about these topics all day long, but we already 20 minutes into the pod. So look, let's go ahead and shift the topic a little bit here. So I like to usually talk about latest career and job search news, trends, topics, and those type of things. Just discuss my takes with my guest co-host here. And interestingly enough, while snooping on your LinkedIn profile, I found your article that you wrote for the Vermont Connection, and it's titled "Reimagining an Antiracist Career Center Based on the Professional Identity Development Model for Black Students and Students of Color." And when I looked at this, I said, I have to talk to Jake immediately. Okay. So look, I've never worked in a career center myself. I'll just start by saying that. I've worked with people who do work in career centers, whether that was as a student or on a board of a career development association. I've also currently do career readiness work for a workforce and economic development program at a local community college. So there's a lot of stuff that, I do that's adjacent to the career centers. But since I've started this work, I've always had a bone to pick with career centers myself. And it first starts with their inability to sort of understand how to serve the Black students and students of color that they work with in general. And then secondly, from my perspective that I've seen, the disservice that many career services organizations at universities do for their students by not staying up to date on what's going on in industry and in practice and the changes that are going on inside of, the world of job searching. But specifically when we talk about your article, I think the first thing I just sort of want to talk to you about is what sort of prompted you to write this article? What sort of sparked this? I know this was in relation to some graduate work, so tell me a little bit about what prompted this.
Yeah, for sure. So, I've worked for 8 years combined in paraprofessional and professional work in career centers. You mentioned never actually working in career centers. At this time right now, I've worked in 4 different career centers in various levels of capacity and leadership. And I'll be completely honest with you, this is not news to any of my colleagues, but I've always been dissatisfied, both as a student and as a full-time staff member, right? And not dissatisfied in the sense of like, we're intentionally bad or underserving our students. No, not at all. Dissatisfied because we're not where I would like us to be, especially as someone who has been a monoracial Black student at a predominantly white institution, at a college or university in America, right? I think that we need to go a lot further. What prompted this article? Being dissatisfied, being ready for something new. During school, when I was writing this article, I think that I had seen a lot of opportunities for people to step in and support the most marginalized, the most underrepresented students, but then a resistance to it, either because of a lack of knowledge or systemic barriers that existed. I think a huge issue is that higher education as an industry is so heavily staffed by white bodies, right? Which just means that lack of representation will result in, a lack of care, right? A lack of intentionality. I have always been the only openly queer young Black man, right? Coming back to those identity pieces in the career centers that I've worked in, which means that I have a unique ability to access the experiences, the wisdom, and the knowledge of the Black community, of the queer community, of young professional communities, right? And so I think the first step in terms of solution, and you didn't ask for solutions yet, but the first step in terms of solution is diversifying the people who are in these roles and counseling our students. That's going to help us get in front of the work, right? The other piece you mentioned was that career centers tend to be using knowledge from a decade or two ago in the best case scenario, right? Some are still giving advice that's 50 years outdated. And when I say 50 years outdated, I mean that in these things that we're talking about, how to leverage yourself as a strong candidate, you need to be diversifying your job search strategy. We're not getting that advice from career centers, right? And it's left to a few amazing career centers around the nation to be sort of the pillars of excellence and to teach other people how to do it well. But of course, they're not going to want to do that. There's no incentive, right? Because if my career center at X university is helping to graduate students feeling career ready, feeling competent in their industry, then that's proprietary information, right? I'm not sharing that with Y university, because then they're going to start graduating students who are at the same level. So there's that competition there, and that's holding back our entire industry.
The Antigen podcast returns with a 3-part miniseries spotlighting maternal immunization. When it comes to vaccine development, there's been a shifting paradigm. Help protect pregnant women and their infants through research rather than from research. Join us this season to dive deeper into this topic, the history, challenges, innovations, and exciting developments to come. Subscribe and listen to The Antigen, powered by Pfizer, on your favorite podcast app.
Yeah, 100%. So interesting, because all of these institutions are, at the end of the day, there to do essentially the same thing, right? The way we build education, especially higher education in this country, is that it's to prepare people for the workforce and to be able to get a better position in the world of work. And if that's the case, then it's like, dude, it doesn't really matter where they get it. Like, at the end of the day, at least they got it, right? But we know that's not how it works. That's not how capitalism works. So we'll just go ahead and we're going to shy over that for a moment, because we'll get into a whole conversation about that piece if we need to. But one thing that I thought was really, and I'm going to be very honest, I'm very frank, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I cuss on this podcast. I think it's incredibly fucked up that you had to say inside of your article. There was something that you said inside of your positionality statement, and it really just stuck out to me. And it was, I fear not the ways authoring this work may impact my academic, professional, and relational standing. Right. And I just thought, I was like, wow, the fact that he even had to sit here and think that, like, me criticizing the institution that I'm working in because I want it to be better for people, that I want it to do well, could even potentially affect not just my professional stuff, but my academic stuff, my personal relationships, all of these things. Like, we always have to sort of account for that when we start critiquing these institutions. And I think it's just incredibly messed up that you even had to say that in this article here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in communities of complacency, right, there is this overwhelming fear of progress, of innovation, right? And just someone saying we could be better is terrifying for people who have internalized whiteness or internalized capitalism as the only economic structure for success, right? It's terrifying. And so as I was authoring this article, and I should have started, thank you so much for reading it. Anyone who visits the article and even scrolls through it quickly, thank you so much for checking it out. That's always an exciting part of a scholar practitioner's journey. But when I was authoring this piece, I constantly thought, what if a future employer or hiring manager sees this article? What are they going to think? Are they going to think that I'm not fit for higher education as an industry? Are they going to think that I'm a difficult person to work with? Over the last 4 years, I've worked in a lot of different places. I mean, maybe not too odd for this new generation of job seekers who are job hopping quite a bit. But I was at the University of Vermont for 18 months. I was at Suffolk University for 12 months, and now Boston University for the last 9 months. You've caught me at an interesting time. This is my week of fun employment. And so last week I worked at Boston University, but next week I'll be transitioning into my 4th professional role out of graduate school. And so, each time I've been applying for these new jobs, I've been worried that I have a subsection within this article that is just blatantly professionalism is racist.
It's racism.
And you got to read into it before you actually know what I'm talking about. But that can be off-putting to folks who don't understand the nuance of racism and anti-racism. and don't understand maybe my commitment to creating a more just world that's more habitable for Black students first. And let me be clear of my priorities. I know my experiences and I know who I can best support and serve. I have 3 young nephews and a niece who will one day hopefully have the opportunity to attend college. And my priority is making sure that college universities are more habitable for them and that job seeking is easier for them and students of color and the other marginalized populations, right? So I think that's my work. And it took a long time to get comfortable with being committed to that work openly for everyone to hear.
Yeah, well, I commend you because I know that's incredibly difficult, especially as, young professionals. We obviously have aspirations for our career and, even thinking that the fact that you are critiquing something because you want it to be better would be a reason for people to, close doors or not want to work with you is, it can be a frightening factor that runs a lot of people away from doing the work and the calling out that needs to be done in order for us to start making some shifts and changes. So I commend you on taking that step, putting that out there. It's hard to put things out there, number one, just for people to judge and critique in general, but number two, that could potentially have some type of effect on, your future. And so I commend you in relation to that. But in your article, one of the things that you focus in on is the National Association for Colleges and Employers, an organization that really is sort of, sort of the guiding light around some of these things when it comes to career centers and how they operate and function and the things that they're doing. And you start by looking at an analysis between their sort of 2014 and 2019 editions of their professional standards document. Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple things that you call out here that I really want to get into, and one of them you've already spoken about was one is the no significant change or revisions in their things, which I found very interesting. The second is diversity as a buzzword, and the third is professionalism is racism. Now, when we talk about no significant change or revision in their stuff, you basically said, look, from 2014 to 2019, it's largely an unchanged document. You guys kept, though the world has changed, we've gotten more conscious around certain things, apparently. I'm going to put that apparently in there. Things are more so at the forefront. They seem to not have addressed anything in relation to the pervasiveness of white supremacy culture in the field of career services. And you say, in this no significant change / revision, professionalism is a direct symptom of white supremacy culture, and the work of career services is to open transformative dialogue around this pertinent topic. And I made a comment here. I said, I love that, and it's very interesting. But I don't know if career services know that that's their, that they have the ability to even do that, to be honest.
Agreed.
But I thought it was a very interesting thing to state here. So what were you saying here? What did you mean by that? Where did that come from, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think it came from, I was a graduate student, and I was very aspirational. I was hoping that 80 to 90% of career educators in America would read my article, even though I knew that wouldn't happen, right? So I was hoping that a lot of folks would read this. And, what I think is important for career educators on college campuses to know is that we get to be cultural influencers of professionalism. We collectively are mobilizing this new generation every couple of years of job seekers and of new professionals, right? So the things that we say and things that we agree upon collectively can be what exists, right? And so while career educators on college campuses don't always know that it's their job to rewrite, redefine, and reimagine what professionalism is and can be, it is their work, right? It is our work, because without the thing, as educators, we're teaching students who will go out and teach others, right? And so the work is ours, it has to be ours, right? This is the burden that educators hold and carry of creating rippling cultural change in our society. Of course, artists hold it as well. People who work in medicine or law or business hold it in different ways as well. But educators are really at this integral part in a young person's life where we get to define so many things for them. And who says that professionalism can't be rewritten as something that not is reflective of Eurocentric cultural norms, but instead an open, inviting space for inclusive ideas and innovation. And I think that's where we need to go. And so I think I wrote that in a way of aspiration, hoping that
Yeah.
folks would join me in this charge
Yeah.
and commit to a reimagination.
And I love that aspiration. And I love the entire statement. I just was like, whew, I just want more people to see it that way, right? Like,
Yeah.
can we get more people to that space? I think if we could even get them there, we could do a lot of work and change. And I think what I really heard from that, though you're speaking directly to career practitioners, is that, we all have a hand in changing the narrative in the way that we currently view and operate inside of these systems, right? And that's what I heard. Even though it was directed at career services professionals, I really think that everybody, in a sense, has a hand in being able to do this. No one's too small to start making changes in this space, especially career service professionals. As you said, career service professionals are sort of the bridge between education and employers. So, if you're going to be that bridge, you have the opportunity to change quite a bit on both sides of the table. And I think that's incredibly important for people who work inside of career services to really understand, right? You have a duty here that I think is incredibly important. So I love the aspiration.
Certainly.
And so
I
definitely want to talk about
it.
it.
And just like I said before about, the first question you asked me was, what's going on with this job market? And I said it's changing, and our job seekers need to be dynamic. NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, needs to be dynamic as well, right? So I was frustrated in my research and my authorship when I realized there were no significant changes or revisions in this NACE document that should be, again, a cultural influencer of how we look at the world of work. And so that frustrated me, and I think that's what sort of inspired this section of the article.
Yeah. And then the next one you go into is that diversity as a buzzword. And so you sort of talk about diversity being used in a shallow and superficial manner that really, fails to accomplish the depth of urgency around tending to racial injustice. You talk about how they state that, career services should recruit, hire, and retain a diverse staff. But you also mentioned a diverse staff can be achieved by employing folks with different academic backgrounds, areas of expertise, pedagogical practices, and so it's a very ambiguous language here. And I appreciate you calling that out. So one of the early episodes, I had on one of my best friends, Dr. Clyde Barnett III, and he and I talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because in all frankness, though I think there's a lot of good intent, I'm not a very big fan of DE&I, personally, because I think there's too much focus on the D&I and not enough on the E. And so, for me, I think that diversity and inclusion in the context that we use them are shallow and superficial, right? You can have a room full of white people, and in that room, it can be technically diverse, right? Based on depending on how you define diverse inside of this. When we include people, we have to ask ourselves, what are we including them in? Do we really want inclusion in systems that are not there and built to support us and sustain us, right? So the diversity and the inclusion piece is always interesting to me because we always seem to miss the equity piece, which is about focusing on addressing the particular needs of different groups or different individuals, which I think is the most important part of all of this work. And so I really appreciate that you sort of call out this token inclusion, like using a black face to present as supportive of black communities inside of there. So I just had to call that out because it really resonated with me as somebody who's sort of been railing against this whole idea of DEI. And it's like, look, we need to really get into the E piece of this because y'all are really focused on the D and I. And sometimes those don't always work very well without the E. Right.
For sure. And let's be honest, right? Diversity is a fairly easy box to check, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot of systemic change, it doesn't take a lot of thought leadership. Diversity in and of itself, just achieving pure diversity, you might not need to change anything. You might just need to look at a different demographic, right? Because that room full of 50 white people that you mentioned before, they might went to 50 different universities. They might be from 50 different states in America, right? They might be from 50 different countries. But here's the thing, diversity, while it is easy, is an important step in achieving equity, in my opinion, right? Of course. Yeah. And when you use diversity as this sort of like either as a buzzword, just to say, oh, I've included it 6 times in my website, check, the box is checked, or black facing an organization, right? I hate when I see a pamphlet or a web page with 3 or 4 black people talking to each other, and then I click 3 times. I go to the meet the team. I click down into board of directors and the chief level employees, and I see no black faces, no brown faces, right? You've blackfaced me. You've lied. You've created this false reality to make me, as a black consumer, trust you a bit more, and that's frustrating. It's disgusting. It's pathetic, right? And so, because diversity and achieving this appearance of diversity is so easy to do, it cannot be our last stop. And I think that's what you're saying as well, right? We have to we have to move beyond. And it's almost as if, like, don't even give me that. If what I really want is, if it's equity or diversity, skip the diversity, right? Don't give me this website with black faces, or, you know, don't give me pride flags in June. I don't want that. What I want is this achieved, realized, equitable community that I can live and thrive in.
Yeah. And I think and see, what I think is, with the equity piece, the diversity and inclusion comes right behind it, right? You can't have the equity without the diversity and inclusion coming in. So, like, I think it's I 100% agree with you. These are all stepping stones to get there, but I think many people see them as stopping points, or right. And so that's where I'm really coming from. And I completely agree. Like, we should not be black-facing organizations. It should just not happen. Are you really putting your money where your mouth is? Are you really trying to make sure that we are addressing the unique needs of different populations, of different groups? And by naturally addressing those unique needs, we will get that diversity. We will get that inclusion inside of these spaces, because they have what they need to thrive and to enter the spaces and stay in those spaces successfully. And I think that's my biggest thing with the inclusion piece, right? We see this all the time. People bring in chief diversity officers, or they bring in, you know, the token C-suite black person, and they're like, yes, we have included people and we are now diverse. But then they have not changed any policies, any procedures. They don't give them the actual budget or the power or the authority to make any of the changes. And so literally it just, once again, becomes a token of diversity and inclusion rather than something that actually drives the needle in a way, right? And so I really appreciate that you sort of called it out. Like, look, I see diversity as a buzzword in here, and I see you using black people, but what's going on inside the actual organization here, right?
Right.
And so I think people often don't have that conversation as much as we should. We see DE&I everywhere now. It's in every job posting. It's on everybody's website. It's everywhere. And sometimes when things are everywhere, it just dilutes the meaning of it. And I think that in sort of the significance of it. And I think that's what I'm really getting at. We see diversity, we see inclusion. And it's really interesting in writing resumes. I see a lot of companies that have D&I committees. They're always skipping the E. It's always not there. Right. And so I'll see things like that. I'm like, okay, we're missing the big piece here. Right. So yeah. But now, the next concept, and this is the big concept that I think a lot of people don't always get, is about professionalism being racist. So tell us a little bit about that from your perspective. I know what you said in the article. I know my own perspective around all this. But in relation to what you wrote, or just sort of your ideas in general, professionalism being racist, what does that mean? How do we get to that conclusion? What do you think here?
Right. It's a bold statement. Right. And this is not one that I oftentimes share with my clients. Right. I work as a workplace equity consultant, and some of my clients bring me in for facilitated workshops or for inclusion audits or for other things. Very rarely am I going to start a presentation by saying, okay, professionalism is racist, and this is how you're going to make it not racist, or this policy you're doing is racist. I think so often we get caught up in, is it racist or is it not racist? Where we really should be just striving for improvement and innovation, progression, more inclusivity. So I recognize the bold statement. I got to this point by looking at all of my professional experiences, looking at all my professional expectations in the roles that I had previous to writing this paper, and the roles that I had observed in my research, right? And professionalism, as I have seen it, right, just through my own eyes, which My lens is looking specifically at the field of education. It's looking specifically at the roles that I was interested in. Professionalism is reflected by Eurocentrism, by a certain type of attire, a certain type of hairstyle, a certain type of speech and language, articulation and diction, a certain collection of previous professional and academic experiences. All these things are very Eurocentric, right? And so if I were to superimpose my Blackness on top of professionalism, I see a lot of things that just don't match up, right? I see a lot of things that just don't work for professionalism. And that's because not only is it reflected by Eurocentrism, but also whiteness and white supremacy culture. I think for all of those reasons, the systemic and individual barriers that exist for people of color to access successfully professionalism and be seen as an expert or to be seen as elite is so challenging that there must be something wrong with professionalism in and of itself. It is a system of rules. It is a system of behaviors and norms that are just not achievable for Black bodies, not achievable for communities of color. And for all those reasons, I deemed it appropriate to title a certain chapter of this text "Professionalism is Racist." And you know, my goal is not as an author to convince anyone of that notion. Hopefully folks can ride along with me on the assumption and find value in the rest of the work.
So as somebody who has gone up through education systems, as somebody who's worked in numerous corporate spaces, as somebody who now works with many corporate organizations revolving around many of these issues, I will say I have had a very similar experience with you. I really do believe professionalism is rooted in white supremacy. It is racist, right? At the end of the day, we have been taught how to conform to a society that was not built to us, built for us. And so that requires us, as we've heard, to do code switching, sometimes put on entire new personalities at work. And you mentioned this later in the article when you're talking about the model, the professional identity development model for Black students and students of color. But you know, I just go back to the time when I was working at a Fortune 500 company, and I decided I was going to grow my hair out. And mind you, I'd never had an issue once ever in my life with anything around my hair because I've always kept a short cut for the longest time. And then I decided I was going to grow my hair out I would say about a year after being at an organization. And the amount of times that I was speaking with many of my colleagues or my leaders, and I just saw their eyes shift from looking at me to looking at my hair and looking back down, or the blatant expression. Like I literally one day had to go into the office for a project I was working on. And I one day I had my hair pulled up into a nice little bun. The other day the next day I wore my hair down and sort of big as like a nice little fro. And then I literally had one of my white counterparts come up to me and say, "Oh, I liked your hair much better pulled back. It just looks so professional." Right?
Yep.
Very interesting, right? And these are the subtle ways in which we are reinforcing professionalism, saying, hey, your hair like that is unacceptable in this space. I don't like it. It's making me uncomfortable. It doesn't look right here, right? That's essentially everything I'm getting from that statement from this lady that decided to come up to me and tell me how she preferred my hair. And when it had nothing to do with any of the things that we're doing or my ability to perform the job that I was doing. So for me, you know, these are the ways that I think professionalism shows up for Black people. The moment I decided to try and be something that is very true to me, the way my hair naturally grows out of my head, now we have some comments coming, and maybe you didn't mean it intentionally. And that's the unfortunate part about racism and white supremacy. It's incredibly ingrained in what we do, all overall in general, right? For Black and white people, because we Black people also internalize white supremacy, right? So we don't often always realize the statements that we're making are birthed from that place, and how that can be read or perceived by others. And so, all I can say is from my own experience, the experience that I've had, but also the experiences that I've talked talk to my friends about, or the Black women that I coach on a regular basis, I would say that many of us tend to agree with your statement here. Professionalism is racist. It just simply is. So I thought this was all very, very good conversation to have, which led to this model that you created. And I'd really like you to tell us a little bit about this model that and sort of, you know, what it is and sort of how you hope it is used.
Certainly. So, you know, I have to give credit where credit is due. I think a lot of scholars start by just looking at the field, right? Looking at what exists around them. And I have to give lots of credit to David Su and Daryl Wing Su, who in 2003 authored a very similar model about racial and cultural identity development. That became sort of my jumping off point for a very similar model, but specifically for students, so looking at a more narrow audience, as well as students of color within professionalism. So an even more narrow purview. This is a model, it's non-linear, but it just sort of outlines some of the different steps and pieces of someone's journey that they might experience as a person of color moving throughout a world of work or throughout professionalism. It outlines a number of different stages, and these stages help to articulate sort of what's going on or what you might be experiencing. I think the biggest thing I wanted to do with this model was give language to experiences that have in the past been unnamed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I think you did that. So I'll tell you from my personal experience in reading this article, when I saw this model and I started to read through each one of your steps, I could literally pinpoint to the different parts of my career journey from the time I exited college to literally quitting and doing my own business, where I fit in each one of these models, where each piece of my life fit in this thing. And so it was really interesting to me because you talk about the first stage, like adoption, right? Where, you know, Black professionals and professionals of color start to learn about the rules of professionalism. You start to talk about the achieved assimilation, right? Where, you know, to exist in different worlds, Black professionals and professionals of colors create different lives that contradict one another. This is where that code switching comes in. The mastering, performing two distinct versions of yourself. Then you talk about the third stage, which is dissonance, right? And it relates very closely to that Sue and Sue model that you were talking about, but it's where people start to question why their experiences are not represented in professionalism. You start to be like, well, why can't I do this, right? Like, why you start to observe and even criticize why professional language, attire, and overall behavior is so closely aligned with Eurocentrism. And then the fourth stage, alignment, right? Where, you know, people begin to experiment with demonstrating their racial and cultural identities at work. That's where I started to grow out my hair, right? And started to see those type of things and things pop up like, oh, okay. And then that fifth and final stage, that creation stage, where it's centering that community care, right? Where people are creating structures for safety for other professionals of color in the world of work. And I thought that was really a great concept too. We see this all the time with Black mentorship programs that happen in different spaces, ERGs, diversity committees, task force, all those things. But another thing you specifically called out here that I'm glad you called attention to was that Black professionals and professionals of color are not compensated for their additional labor in creating racially affirmative practices or calling out injustice, right? We tend to participate in those things out of a feeling of obligation or duty to the people that come after us to try and make this space better for them. When in reality, that's tough, hard work for people to do, and they should be compensated for that, especially because it makes your company or organization looks good. It changes the perception of your company and organization, the recruitment ability, the talent acquisition capacity that you have as an organization. So all of these 5 steps for me, I think they resonated with me so deeply. And like I said, I could vividly categorize different parts of my life into these different stages of this model. So for me, I thought it was really great. I'd love to hear anything else you want to share about it. I know we probably shouldn't give too much because I do want people to go and actually read the article. We're going to link to it in the show notes. So I want people to go read it. But anything else you want to add around that model by chance?
Well, no, I mean, thank you again so much for reading it, and thanks for sort of giving it your time and your attention. And it's clear that this resonated for you a little bit, right? And that's because it's informed by my experiences and experiences of the folks who I interviewed in preparation and research for this article. Again, so much of it was just so I can give some names to things
Yeah.
that I couldn't name previously for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you went through each one and sort of can point out things that you've done in your own professional career that feel
Mm-hmm.
aligned with that. This is non-linear, of course, and so the goal is not for everyone to get to alignment or creation. It won't be everyone's responsibility to develop, systems of recruitment that focus on Black folks or systems of retention. Right? We don't all work in HR. We don't all have the capacity to do this. Usually, unpaid or
Mm-hmm.
underpaid labor. But what's important to know is that there might be people doing this work in your organization or in your company. And now, hopefully, folks will have the language to name it, to celebrate it, to call it out, and to support it, right? If folks are having that dissonance, maybe we can find ways to help them get to a place of alignment where they're taking care of themselves and safeguarding their own cultural and identity conscious wellness. And then maybe we can, garner more allies to
Mm-hmm.
help with the creation portion, right? Raising funds to ensure that there's resources for affinity groups and whatnot. Things are going to safeguard the retention of Black and professionals of color.
Yeah, 100%. And just so you all know, and I'll say this specifically for my career services professionals out there, Jake lists some lists of demands, right? We're not talking about a recommendation section. It's a list of demands, and I love that. I love the change for NACE, but also for offices of career services and employers. And I'm not going to dive deeply into those because I want y'all to go look at them. I want you to go take a look at the recommendations, especially if you work in a career services field. There's an extensive list of recommendations and demands for you all in that space that I think would be very good things for you to look at, but also for you to start having conversations, opening conversations about inside of your offices with your colleagues in your next team meetings. I think these would be really great things to bring to light and start, use this article as sort of the impetus to sort of drive that change that you might be seeking inside of those career services. So,
yeah, thank you for that plug. And I want to say that after I published this article, I started getting messages from folks at different career centers asking me small questions or saying, hey, could you give us some prompting questions to digest this as a group together? Could you come and lead a facilitated workshop? And since then, that's really been the jumping off point for my consultancy. And so I've done a lot of work to tour around this article to a few different career centers and help them to process the information as a group, as a collective. If there are specific questions you have, please, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to come into either your staff meeting or group and help you process some of these sometimes uncomfortable truths, right? Dealing with and grappling with professionalism as these systems that we've talked about. So the work is not yours to do alone.
It is not yours to do alone, and Jake can help you, but I don't know if Jake will say it, but I'll say it for you. Please ensure that if you reach out to Jake, that Jake gets paid for his time. Let's be mindful of what you're doing here, okay?
Thank you.
Don't just reach out to him, expecting him to give you his brilliant mind, expertise, time, all of that for free. So if this is going to be the impetus, the podcast is going to be the impetus, Tristan told you to pay Jake, okay?
Thank you.
I just hate when people, I know, when you are in this space of wanting to make change, oftentimes it's really easy to give up a lot of your time for the good of the order, right? It's like, hey, if this is going to help, I want to try and help as much as I can. But we need to pour into the people that are helping as much as we can. And so I appreciate you even taking the time to do all this research and to do this writing, Jake. As you can see, this article resonated so much with me, so much so that our episode is going to be almost an hour at this point. So I appreciate you also giving me extra time because I know we were planning on about 30-minute conversation, my friend. So I'm sorry I took more time. I'm sorry.
And we might need to call this part one because there's a lot of things that we didn't cover. So let's get back on the air and keep going at it sometime in the future.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely will. So let's go ahead and wrap up and tell the people where they can find you on the internet streets.
Certainly, yes. So I'm most active on LinkedIn. It's where Tristan and I first met and where I meet a lot of new connections and new folks in my network. You can find me at linkedin.com/n/Jake-Small. customized links, so it should be easy to find. I am the profile with the pride flag after my name. So just look for that. You'll be able to find it. And then on Instagram and Twitter, I use the username at I'm Jake Small, the letter I, the letter M, Jake Small. Or you can check out my website, www.imjakesmall.com.
Perfect. So all of those things will be in the show notes. So make sure you go to check out Jake on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and his website. And once again, Jake, I really appreciate your time today, man. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And I can't wait for us to have another conversation on the pod again soon.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. And thanks to all the listeners.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Until next time.